is called the figure of 8 knot. And it's called a figure of 8 because when you've done it, it looks a little bit like a figure of 8. And in fact, if I move it so that the ends are coming out sideways, you can see that it's a figure of 8. Okay? Very simple knot and very adaptable. And the principal use of it is to make a loop. So if you need a fixed loop for anything that you're doing, it might be if you're pulling a lot of logs along on the rope, you might want a loop to put your shoulder into. If you're doing a balancing act out on the edge of some water and you want to put a rope around your waist as a sort of a lifeline, then you can use a figure of 8. If you're climbing on a pitch, then you join onto the rope with a figure of 8. It's very adaptable. And there's also some other uses of loops once you've made them. So when I say making a loop, effectively, you can just take a piece of the rope anywhere and all I'm doing is to, if I went like that, that's what I call a simple overhand knot, just like you might do when you're doing up your laces. But for the figure of 8, what you're actually doing is to go round, and instead of putting it up there, you come round the back and bring it through from the other direction. And that makes a figure of 8. And when you pull it up, that is the loop you've made. So you can make that any size you like. And if for example, if that was a climbing rope and you wanted to do some climbing, there's my carabiner, you'd want something in the end of the rope. So what you would do is to double it, go round the back, but not just come straight through there, come round to the front and under. See what I've done? Now if I was going to do some climbing, I would just clip that into my harness. Like that. And then I'm secured on the end of the climb rope. But because you want to be absolutely secure, you'll notice I've left a little tail there. And what you would do is a couple of little knots in that, just for absolute security. So there's no risk of that coming apart in any way. Now that's one use of the figure of 8 and one way to make it up. If you've got some harnesses have a number of attachment points so that you're attached not just from your waist but perhaps from upper parts around your shoulders, you can also make the same knot by doing it singly. It's a figure of 8 round the back. Right, that's the figure of 8 knot. And then let's suppose I haven't got a carabiner. I've just got this waistband. What I can actually do is take the end and go round like that. And then I do what's called follow my leader, which is to just go out there round that, and everywhere the rope has gone, you follow it. See what I'm doing? And you finish up with exactly the same knot, except you've threaded it through something instead of having a nice snap link to link onto. And again, you can finish that off the same way as I did before. So that's the figure of 8 knot, and it can be used to make your loop in the end of the rope, or if you want to make it halfway along the rope. You know, there might be 2 or 3 people pulling a cart or something like that. You can just say, well, there's one, exactly the same way. And you go along a bit and somebody's going to be a couple of paces away and they want to put their shoulder into it. And you can do it. And so on. So it's a very versatile knot, and it's very strong. It won't come apart. It's not an ideal knot. There are better knots, but they are more complicated. For example, if you wanted to make a loop in a rope, those of you that are sailing, you would make a bowline. And that is probably the simplest knot to make a loop. But a lot of people make mistakes when they make it and finish up with something that will slip or come undone. So if you don't know or can't remember how to make a bowline, then you use the next best thing, which is a figure of 8. And anybody who's instructing a group of people can walk along, and if the knot looks like a figure of 8, then it very likely is a figure of 8. Whereas a lot of things will look like a bowline, but maybe aren't, and they could slip. So the universal knot for climbing, for tying on or making loops in the rope, is a figure of 8. Right, I'm just going to show you a typical use of the figure of 8 knot, because it's very adaptable. And that's what's often called a lorry hitch. And it's a method for securing a load. If you imagine that you've got a lorry with a tarpaulin over it, coming down the sides, and you want to get that tarpaulin pulled down really hard, what you'll finish up with is a loop in the tarpaulin that you put your rope into, and I'll just put that around that and let that be the rope coming off of the tarpaulin on the load. That's the equivalent of what would be on the side of the lorry. There's usually a big hook down the side. So you're pulling a load down, tarpaulin or a rope holding something in place, and you want to secure it onto that, but you want to get it really tight. So what you do, about here, give yourself a figure of 8 loop. Now remember how we did it? You just go round the back, you don't tuck it straight under, you come through and down like that. Right, so you've made a loop there. Now, this is the clever bit. You take the end of the rope and you go round your hook on the side of the vehicle, come back up, and you go through the loop you've made. So sometimes called, I think, a wagoner's hitch. Now, what you can actually do is you can pull on that, and it's the equivalent of having like a pulley arrangement, and you've made the equivalent of the pulley there. and you can get that really tight. You can almost play a tune on that, and then you just secure that off there. And tie that off. And that's your load secured. And you can use that system any time you've got the roof rack on a car and you've got stuff up on the roof rack that you want to secure. You can use that system. Equally, if you're ever doing any woodwork, and perhaps you're building chairs or tables that have to be glued, and then you want to hold those legs firmly in place, you can use smaller cord, and between the legs or around the frame, you can use exactly the same principle. So that's a typical use of the figure of 8 knot. The other thing that it's used for is what we call a stopper knot. When you do any sewing, the end of the cord, you always make a little knotting, right, which engages in the material so that you can sew things without the thread pulling out. And often people would just use that, which is what we call an overhand knot. If you want something a bit bulkier than that, if you use a figure of 8 knot, that then pulls up into something that is a lot bulkier and is a much better way to start off your sewing with. Or if you've got a rope going through a hole in a piece of wood and you want to stop it pulling through. So the figure of 8 is a very, very versatile knot indeed. And I'll just show you something that it can be quite decorative. Now that is called a Turks Head, and it's called a 5-bite Turks Head because there are 5 loops going round it, and there's a 5-sided gap in the middle called a pentagon, and that's often used for decoration. You could double up on that and make it into a flat mat for perhaps resting mugs or things on, or you can roll it round on its side and make a scout woggle. But believe it or not, that is actually made from a figure of 8 knot. And I'll just show you that to finish with. There's my figure of 8. And what we do is we arrange it so that it's like a figure of 8. See what I've done? And then we pick it up and we fold it over our fingers. And if you look at that, you can see you've already got that crisscross weave which appears when you have a Turk's Head being made. And then what you do, this is like plaiting. If you imagine those are like 3 strands of plaiting, you know, the young ladies when they make a pigtail or something like that, 3 strands. So what you do is that goes over that goes over that, and that tucks through. Then you go round, you come up the other side, that goes like that, and that goes through. And that produces your figure of your plait that I showed you earlier. So that's very easy to do, and it's another way of making a woggle, but it all started with a figure of 8. So what we'll do now, just to finish off, I'll give you a short piece of rope. Who wants to volunteer to try and tie a figure of 8? Okay, Ben, now you have a go and see if you can tie a figure eight.
So you do a loop and you go round. Wait, you go through or?
No, you've got to twist it and put it through. That's it. Brilliant. There you go. Well done.
Just doing my own
And I'm
thing.
sure